I just got back, as I said, from doing this Brethren service for 2.5 years. And as a matter of fact, I didn't hear much about Marilyn Monroe. A little bit over there in the press, but most of the press over in Europe was Sophie Loren. I spent most of my time in Italy, and the press was Sophie Loren and Gina Lollobrigida. And Joshua Logan saw me in Skin of Our Teeth on Broadway, and somehow he got the idea that I was playing like the killer of the world. I was playing like Cain from the Bible, metaphorically speaking. And he saw that kind of energy that I had in that drama, and somehow he transferred it to the comedy of Bus Stop. And he really is his insistence that they screen tested me, and he wanted me for the role, and nobody in the studio wanted me for the role except Buddy Adler, but he happened to be head of the studio. So that's how I got the job. That's how I got into Bus Stop. In 1956, when I got into movies with Bus Stop, it was just the beginning of a transformation of Hollywood. It was still, the studio system was still very much intact. Like most actors that were stars were tied to long-term contracts with studios. Even a big star like Glenn Ford, he constantly had these long-term contracts, which he would turn one over into another, and they were in dozens and dozens of films. And when I got in, it just started to change a little bit. And my contract was not what I called a slave contract. It wasn't one of those 7 years contracts where they could put me in anything they wanted. My contract was 2 pictures a year for 6 years, with a year off every other year to go back to Broadway, and also the ability to work for any of the studio without being loaned out. I didn't have to give my salary to 20th Century Fox when I worked with United Artists, like in my second picture. So it was still a strong studio system. And then, as a matter of fact, I was part of the change of that, because I bought out of my contract with 20th Century Fox in order to produce my own movie, The Hoodlum Priest. And at the same time, John Cassavetes started to develop his movies, although they were very different styles. Mine were more mainstream movies, and his were more art films. Like I did The Hoodlum Priest, which was competed with all the other big box office movies and did very well. And his film, The Shadows, was just highly thought of in artistic circles, but not in commercial circles. But that kind of branching out started really with the two of us, in a sense that like Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster were already doing it as producers, but they weren't writing and creating the movies, whereas Cassavetes and I were. But then the actors started to create movies as well, just like we see today, Clint Eastwood. But the beginning of that was back in the late 50s, right after I started in movies. I was in a movie called Advise and Consent. And the main plot in Advise and Consent is that a senator who is challenging the president's choice as Secretary of State, that one of the people that was for the choice of Secretary of State digs up this information that shows that he had a sexual relationship while he was in the Army with a guy overseas when they were overseas. Now, people call the character of Brig Anderson a homosexual, but when I was in Washington and at the press thing that, they have the press, whatever the press party or whatever it is. Anyway, they asked me how it was to play a homosexual. I said, what do you mean play a homosexual? I said, if President Kennedy hits one golf ball, do you call him a golfer? So anyway, the character was considered to be homosexual, and as a matter of fact, Preminger, when he hired me, he said, "Now, Don," he said, many stars have turned down this role because being the homosexual, they're afraid that people think they were homosexual, it'll ruin their reputation. Would you be afraid of being called a homosexual or playing a homosexual?" I said, well, Otto, you played Nazis. Would you be afraid of being called a Nazi? And he said, "I'm not afraid of being a Nazi."